My daughter asked me for a $10,000 loan during a trip with her new boyfriend. She forgot to hang up, and I heard her say, "This is the useless man who will leave me a $19 million inheritance." I stayed silent. The surprise came when she returned and knocked on my door. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I never thought a simple phone call would shatter everything I believed about my only daughter. My name is Stuart. I'm 60 years old, and for 3 decades I thought I knew Martha better than anyone in this world. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in September when my phone rang. I was in my home office going through some old financial documents when I saw Martha's name on the screen. My heart always lifted a little when she called. Despite being 32 years old and living her own life, she was still my little girl. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, settling back in my chair with a smile. "Dad." "Hi." Her voice sounded different, more animated than usual. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Never a bad time for you, Martha. What's going on?" She took a breath, and I could almost picture her gathering courage. "Well, James and I are planning this amazing trip to Italy. You remember James, right? My new boyfriend?" Of course I remembered James. I'd met him twice, maybe 3 times. He seemed nice enough, though there was something about his handshake that felt too firm, too practiced. But Martha seemed happy, and that's all that mattered to me. "Yes, I remember James. Italy sounds wonderful, honey." "It really is going to be incredible, Dad. We've been planning this for months. Rome, Florence, Venice, the whole experience. The thing is," she paused, and I knew what was coming. This wasn't the first time Martha had called with a request like this. "How much do you need, sweetheart?" $10,000. The words came out quickly, like she was ripping off a bandage. "I know it's a lot, Dad, but this trip is really important to me, to us. James has been working so hard, and I just want to do something special together." $10,000. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't everything either. I'd helped Martha before, her college loans, her car, that deposit for the apartment she shared with her ex-boyfriend 2 years ago. She was my daughter. What else was money for? "I think we can work something out," I said carefully. "When do you need it?" "Really? Oh my God, Dad, you're the best. We're actually leaving this weekend, so if you could transfer it by Thursday, that would be perfect." This weekend. That was cutting it close. But Martha had always been spontaneous. It was one of the things I loved about her spirit. "Let me check my accounts and get back to you, okay?" "Of course, thank you so much, Dad." "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart." I thought the call had ended. I was already reaching for my laptop to check my savings account when I heard voices coming from my phone. Martha hadn't hung up properly, and somehow the line was still connected. I should have ended the call right then. I should have respected her privacy and clicked off, but I didn't. Did he say yes? It was a man's voice. "James." "Of course he said yes," Martha replied. And there was something in her tone I'd never heard before. Something cold. The old fool always says yes. I could ask him for 50,000 and he'd find a way. My hand froze over the laptop keyboard. "Old fool? 10 grand though. That's not bad for a week in Italy," James said with a laugh. "James, you don't understand. This isn't about the trip." Martha's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "This is about building the relationship, making sure he trusts you, likes you." "Why does that matter?" There was a pause, and when Martha spoke again, her voice carried a tone I'd never heard from my daughter before. It was calculating, cold, completely foreign to the woman I thought I'd raised. "Because that useless old man is worth $19 million. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing become shallow. Useless old man. The daughter I'd sacrificed everything for, the child I'd loved unconditionally for 32 years, saw me as nothing more than a walking bank account. $19 million? James whistled low. "Seriously? His house alone is worth $2.5 million. Then there's his investments, his retirement accounts, the life insurance policy. I've been keeping track." She'd been keeping track. Of course she had. "And he doesn't have anyone else?" "Just me. My mom died when I was 2, remember? He never remarried, never had other kids. Spent his whole pathetic life focused on me." She laughed, and the sound made me physically ill. "The poor bastard actually thinks I visit because I love him. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. 30 years of bedtime stories, of helping with homework, of cheering at school plays, of staying up all night when she had the flu. 30 years of putting her needs before my own, of choosing her happiness over relationships, over career opportunities, over everything. "So what's the plan?" James asked. "Simple. I keep him happy, keep him thinking I'm the devoted daughter, maybe get him to like you, enough to include you in some financial decisions. Then we wait." "Wait for what?" "For him to die, obviously." Martha's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "He's 60. He's got maybe 15, 20 years left if he's lucky, but honestly, the way he's been looking lately, all stressed about retirement, I give him 10 years max. 10 years max. My own daughter was calculating my death like a business investment. What if he lives longer than that? Then we find ways to speed things up. Nothing dramatic, obviously. Just help nature along. Stop encouraging him to take his blood pressure medication. Suggest he try some new extreme sport. Old men have accidents all the time." I couldn't breathe. I literally could not draw air into my lungs. The woman I'd devoted my entire adult life to was casually discussing ways to hasten my death for money. "You're incredible," James said, and I could hear the admiration in his voice. "I mean, that's really thinking ahead. That's why we're perfect together, baby. You get the long-term vision. So this Italy trip is an investment in our future. Dad pays for it. You get to experience the kind of lifestyle we'll have once he's gone, and he gets to feel good about himself for being the generous father. Everybody wins. Everybody wins, except the useless old man who was funding his own daughter's scheme to inherit his money as quickly as possible." "I have to admit," James continued, "when you first told me your dad was loaded, I wasn't sure I believed you. He seems so ordinary. That's the beauty of it. He's too boring and trusting to be suspicious. He actually thinks I call him because I want to hear his voice." They both laughed at that. The sound echoed in my empty office, in my empty heart. Finally, I heard Martha say, "Okay, I should probably hang up before he tries to call back about the money transfer." The line went dead. I sat in complete silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The afternoon sun streamed through my office window, illuminating the framed pictures on my desk. Martha at 5, missing her front teeth. Martha at graduation, beaming in her cap and gown. Martha at 25, cutting the cake at her first wedding, the one I'd paid for. Every single photo was a lie. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water with shaking hands. Then I sat at the table where Martha and I had eaten countless meals together, and I tried to process what I'd just learned. My daughter didn't love me. She'd been pretending for years, maybe decades. Every visit, every phone call, every "I love you, Dad," had been a performance designed to keep me docile and generous until the day I died, and she could claim her inheritance. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the casual cruelty in her voice when she called me useless, pathetic, a poor bastard. It was the clinical way she discussed my death. It was the realization that I'd been completely alone all these years, thinking I had a loving family, when in reality, I had nothing but a predator wearing my daughter's face. I stayed silent. I didn't call her back. I didn't scream or cry or throw anything. I just sat there as the sun moved across the kitchen and the shadows grew longer, understanding that my life as I knew it was over. But something else was beginning. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, and my mind kept drifting back to the beginning, to when Martha really was the center of my universe, for all the right reasons. Margaret died when Martha was 2 years old. Breast cancer, aggressive and merciless. One day we were planning Martha's 3rd birthday party, and 6 months later, I was a widower with a toddler who kept asking where Mommy went. I remember that first night alone with Martha after the funeral. She woke up crying at 2 a.m, calling for Margaret. I picked her up from her crib, this tiny person who was all I had left of my wife, and I made a promise. I promised Margaret, I promised Martha, and I promised myself that this little girl would never want for anything. She would never feel abandoned or unloved. For 30 years, I kept that promise. Maybe too well. I gave up dating when Martha was 5. There had been a woman, Linda, who worked at the bank where I managed accounts. She was kind, patient with Martha, and I thought maybe we could build something together. But Martha threw tantrums every time Linda came over. She'd hide in her room or suddenly develop stomach aches when Linda and I planned to go out. "She's just not ready," Linda said one evening after Martha had spent dinner in sullen silence. "Maybe we should wait a few more months." But months turned into a year, and Martha's resistance never lessened. Eventually, Linda moved on, and I convinced myself it was for the best. Martha needed stability, not the confusion of new relationships. I told myself the same thing when I turned down the promotion that would have required relocating to Dallas. Martha was 8 then, settled in her school, attached to her teacher. The extra $50,000 a year would have been nice, but what was money compared to my daughter's happiness? When Martha was 12, she decided she wanted to take violin lessons. Not just any violin lessons, but private instruction with the first-chair violinist from the City Symphony. $200 an hour, twice a week. "Dad, please," she begged, clutching the brochure from the Music Academy. "Sarah's mom says this teacher is the best in the state. If I'm going to do this, I should do it right." I looked at my budget. We were comfortable, but not wealthy. $400 a week was nearly half my mortgage payment, but Martha's eyes were so bright with excitement, and I remembered Margaret playing piano in the evenings, how music had filled our house with warmth. "Okay, sweetheart, we'll find a way." I found a way by taking on weekend consulting work. Every Saturday and Sunday for 2 years, I reviewed financial portfolios for small businesses, giving up my free time so Martha could pursue her passion. She quit after 18 months, just stopped wanting to go. "I'm bored with it, Dad. All my friends are doing soccer now." I didn't complain about the thousands of dollars we'd spent or the weekends I'd lost. I signed her up for soccer. Elite traveling team, of course. The best equipment, the most expensive camps. This became the pattern. Martha would develop an intense interest in something. I would move heaven and earth to support it, and then she would lose interest and move on to the next thing. Piano, horseback riding, tennis, art classes, dance. Each passion cost thousands of dollars and demanded my complete attention and support. I told myself it was normal. Kids explore, they try new things. The important thing was that Martha knew she could count on me, that I would always say yes, always find a way. When she was 16 and wanted a car, not just any car, but a brand new Honda Civic because everyone else has new cars, I took out a loan I probably couldn't afford. When she decided she wanted to attend the expensive private college 3 states away, instead of the perfectly good state university 20 minutes from home, I refinanced the house to pay the tuition. When she called crying during her sophomore year because she'd gotten in trouble for underage drinking and needed a lawyer, I hired the best criminal defense attorney in her college town. When she wanted the big wedding to Derek, her first husband, I emptied my retirement account to pay for the reception she dreamed of. 300 guests, an ice sculpture, a 12-piece band, flowers flown in from Ecuador. "Dad, this is the most important day of my life," she'd said, tears in her eyes, as we looked at the catering estimates. "I know it's expensive, but I've dreamed of this since I was little." The marriage lasted 18 months. When Martha called to tell me she was getting divorced, she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "He's taking everything, Dad. The house, the car, even the furniture. I don't have anywhere to go." Of course I helped. I found her an apartment, paid the deposit and first year's rent up front. I bought her furniture, helped her get back on her feet. When she mentioned that Derek was keeping the engagement ring and she felt emotionally devastated every time she thought about it, I bought her a new diamond necklace to help her remember her worth. Looking back now, I realize I never questioned why Derek was taking everything. I never asked if maybe there was more to the story. I just assumed my daughter was the victim and opened my wallet. After the divorce, Martha went through what she called her finding herself phase. She moved to California to pursue acting, then to New York to try fashion design. Each new dream required startup money, living expenses, the right contacts. I supported every venture, even when my financial advisor gently suggested I might want to slow down on the withdrawals from my retirement accounts. Martha is investing in her future, I told him. What else is money for? When she decided to move back home at 28, I was thrilled. She'd grown tired of the big city life, she said. She missed family, missed having someone who really cared about her. Dad, you're the only person who's ever truly believed in me, she said, the day she moved back into her childhood bedroom. I'm so lucky to have you. I felt like the richest man in the world. For the next 4 years, Martha lived with me on and off. She'd stay for a few months, then move in with whatever boyfriend she was dating, then come back when the relationship ended. Each return was emotional, filled with tears and gratitude for having a father who would always take her in. I loved having her home. The house felt alive again when Martha was there. We'd watch movies together, cook dinner, talk about her plans for the future. She'd tell me about her dates, her job interviews, her dreams of starting her own business someday. You know what, Dad? She said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. When I have kids, I hope I can be half the parent you've been to me. Now, lying in my bed at 3 a.m, I understood the truth. Every tearful return home, every expression of gratitude, every "I love you, Dad," had been calculated. She'd learned early that I was an easy mark, that all she had to do was appeal to my love for her, and I would give her anything she wanted. The crying about Derek taking everything, probably a lie designed to extract maximum sympathy and money. The business ventures that never quite worked out, probably never serious attempts, just elaborate stories to justify regular financial support. The gratitude for having a father who believed in her, just words designed to keep the money flowing. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, all the opportunities I'd passed up, all the relationships I'd avoided, because I believed Martha needed me. I thought about my retirement account, substantially smaller than it should have been, because I'd prioritized my daughter's immediate wants over my long-term security. Most of all, I thought about Margaret and what she would think if she knew what our daughter had become. Tomorrow, Martha would call expecting confirmation of the money transfer for her Italy trip. She would use that sweet, grateful voice she'd perfected over the years. She would tell me how much she loved me, how lucky she was to have such a generous father. And for the first time in 30 years, I would have to decide what to do with the knowledge that it was all a lie. Wednesday morning came, and I did something I'd never done before in 30 years of being Martha's father. I lied to her. When she called to check on the money transfer, her voice bright and expectant. I told her there had been a delay with the bank, something about large transfer protocols and verification procedures. She sounded disappointed, but not suspicious. Oh, that's annoying, but I guess these things happen. You'll have it sorted by tomorrow, though, right, Dad? I'm working on it, sweetheart, I said, and the endearment tasted bitter in my mouth. What I was actually working on was something entirely different. For the first time in my relationship with Martha, I was going to verify her story before handing over the money. I started with social media. I'd never paid much attention to Martha's online presence before, but now I studied her Facebook and Instagram accounts like I was preparing for an exam. The posts about James were interesting. They'd been dating for exactly 2 months, according to her relationship status update. Yet she'd told me they'd been planning this Italy trip for months. I scrolled through James's profile too. He worked in sales for a medical device company, drove a leased BMW, and posted frequently about expensive restaurants and weekend trips. His employment history showed a pattern of job changes every 12 to 18 months. Most telling were the photos on his Instagram from the past year. Pictures from Las Vegas, Miami, the Bahamas, always in expensive hotels, always with different women. Martha wasn't his first wealthy girlfriend. I spent the afternoon calling hotels in Rome and Florence, using the travel dates Martha had mentioned. When I found the reservation at the Hotel de Russie in Rome under James's name, I nearly hung up. But then the reservations clerk mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Yes, the penthouse suite for 8 nights, quite expensive at €4,000 per night, but Mr. Patterson said cost was no object, €4,000 per night. For 8 nights, that was over $36,000, not the $10,000 Martha had asked for. Either she was planning to supplement my money with a significant amount of her own, which seemed unlikely given her employment history, or there was more to this trip than she'd told me. I called her employer, the marketing firm where she claimed to work part-time. According to HR, Martha had been terminated 6 weeks ago for excessive absences. 6 weeks ago, and she hadn't mentioned losing her job, but she had mentioned needing money for a trip. That evening, I did something that felt like betrayal, but was really just self-preservation. I drove to Martha's apartment building and sat in my car across the street waiting. I felt like a private investigator in some crime drama, but I needed to see for myself what kind of life my daughter was really living. James arrived at 7:30, driving his BMW. I watched him park in a visitor spot and walk into the building with the confidence of someone who belonged there. 20 minutes later, they emerged together, Martha wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something that looked expensive. I followed them to Chez Laurent, the most expensive French restaurant in the city. The kind of place where dinner for two could easily cost $300. Through the window, I watched them order wine that I knew cost more per bottle than most people spent on groceries in a week. I sat in my car in the parking lot watching my daughter live a lifestyle that her part-time marketing job could never support. A lifestyle that made no sense unless she had another source of income. Unless she had me. When I got home, I did something I'd never done before. I went through my own financial records systematically, adding up every penny I'd given Martha over the past 5 years. The number was staggering, over $200,000. $200,000 in 5 years? Money for apartments, cars, business ventures that never materialized, emergency expenses that seemed to happen monthly, gifts for special occasions that included her birthday, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter, and what she called just because you're the best dad ever occasions. I pulled out my calculator and did the math. If Martha had been working even part-time for the past 5 years and saving the money I gave her instead of spending it, she could have bought herself a house. Instead, she was living month to month, depending on my generosity to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford. The next morning, I called my attorney, Robert Chen. We'd worked together for 15 years, handling my will, my estate planning, and various business matters. Robert was discreet, thorough, and most importantly, he'd met Martha numerous times at office functions and holiday parties. "Stuart, good to hear from you. How can I help?" "Robert, I need to ask you something confidential. If someone wanted to contest a will in this state, what grounds would they need?" There was a pause. "That's an interesting question. Are you concerned about Martha challenging your estate plans?" "I'm concerned about understanding my options." Robert walked me through the basics. In our state, a child could only contest a will if they could prove undue influence, lack of mental capacity, or fraud. But if the will was properly executed and the person was of sound mind, it would be very difficult to overturn. However, Robert continued, there are other considerations. If someone is named as a beneficiary and then becomes financially dependent on the deceased person before death, they might argue that certain gifts or transfers were really advance inheritances. "What do you mean?" "Well, if you've been regularly giving Martha large sums of money and then she inherits your estate, someone could argue that she's essentially received her inheritance twice. It's complex, but it's something to consider." After I hung up, I sat in my office staring out the window. Martha hadn't just been planning to inherit my money when I died. She'd been systematically extracting it while I was alive, essentially giving herself an advance on her inheritance without my knowledge. The Italy trip wasn't an isolated request. It was part of a long-term financial strategy. I spent the rest of the day researching James Patterson. What I found painted a clear picture of a man who made a living attaching himself to women with money. His LinkedIn profile showed jobs in sales, but also gaps in employment that coincided with relationships with women who posted about expensive trips and gifts. There was Jessica, a doctor's daughter in Phoenix, who'd posted about a wonderful boyfriend who'd introduced her to fine dining and luxury travel. The relationship ended abruptly after 8 months, and Jessica's posts afterward mentioned having to move back in with her parents due to unexpected financial difficulties. And there was Amanda in Seattle, who worked in tech and whose Instagram showed a year of expensive adventures with a handsome boyfriend who looked exactly like James. Amanda's final post about the relationship was bitter. Some people see love as an opportunity instead of a commitment. Martha was just the latest in a pattern. That evening, I got a text from Martha. "Dad, still no word from the bank? We're supposed to leave Friday, and I need to finalize some arrangements." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Still working on it. These things take time." Her response came immediately. "I know you'll figure it out. You always do. Love you." 3 little words that had once meant everything to me and now felt like a calculated manipulation. I turned off my phone and sat in the growing darkness of my living room. Tomorrow was Thursday. Martha expected the money by end of business day, so she could leave for Italy on Friday. I had less than 24 hours to decide what I was going to do. For the first time in 30 years, my daughter wasn't going to get what she wanted from me. But she didn't know that yet. I had one more day to watch her perform the role of loving daughter. One more day to observe how effortlessly she lied to my face. One more day to prepare for the conversation that would change everything between us. Because Friday morning, when Martha came to collect her money for the trip, she was going to get the surprise of her life. And for the first time since I'd overheard that phone call, I was actually looking forward to something. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, but I felt more alert than I had in years. There's something clarifying about having your illusions stripped away. It hurts, but it also brings a strange kind of freedom. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the rain streak down the windows. At exactly 9:15, I heard Martha's key in the front door. She'd kept a key to my house since moving out, for emergencies, she'd said. Now I wondered how many times she'd used it when I wasn't home. "Dad, I'm here." Her voice was cheerful, musical even. She appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing jeans and a sweater that looked expensive, carrying a large purse and what appeared to be an overnight bag. "Good morning, sweetheart." The word still felt wrong in my mouth, but I forced myself to sound normal. "You're up early." "Well, our flight's at 2, so I wanted to make sure we got the money transfer sorted out first." She sat down across from me, setting her purse on the table with a soft thud. "James is picking me up at 11, so we have plenty of time." James was picking her up at 11, here, at my house. This was going to be even more interesting than I'd anticipated. "Can I get you some coffee?" "That would be great, thanks." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through what looked like travel confirmations. "I'm so excited, Dad. I can't remember the last time I took a real vacation." I poured her coffee, adding cream the way she liked it. A small gesture that once felt loving and now felt like part of an elaborate performance we were both giving. "Tell me about the itinerary again," I said, settling back into my chair. Martha's face lit up, and for a moment she looked like the enthusiastic child I remembered. "Well, we fly into Rome this afternoon, and we're staying at this amazing hotel in the city center. Then we're taking a train to Florence for 3 days, and ending in Venice. James has never been to Italy, so I want to show him everything." "It sounds wonderful and expensive." She laughed, a sound that used to warm my heart. "Well, yes, but that's what makes it special, right? I mean, if we're going to do this, we should do it right. Do it right." The same phrase she'd used about the violin lessons, the private school, the wedding to Derek. Always the best, always the most expensive, always justified by some vague notion of doing things properly. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," I said carefully, "about the $10,000. Martha's attention snapped to me, her phone forgotten. "Oh, good. Were you able to get it sorted out with the bank?" "I want to understand something first. You said you and James have been planning this for months." "That's right. But you've only been dating for 2 months." She blinked, and I saw the first crack in her composure. "Oh, well, I meant we've been talking about taking a trip together for a while. You know how it is when you meet someone special. You start making all these plans." "I see." And James is paying for his portion of the trip? Of course. Well, mostly. I mean, we're splitting some things and I'm covering others. That's how couples do it, right? I nodded as if this made perfect sense. What kind of work does James do again? He's in medical device sales. He does really well. But you know how it is with commission-based jobs. Sometimes the payments are delayed. Delayed payments. How convenient. And you're still working at the marketing firm? Another blink, another microscopic hesitation. Actually, I've been transitioning to freelance work. More flexibility, better clients. The corporate world was just so restricting, you know? Freelance work, also known as unemployment with a better marketing spin. That's smart, sweetheart, building your own client base. Martha relaxed slightly, probably thinking she'd navigated the question successfully. Exactly. It's scary at first, but I think it's going to pay off in the long run. At exactly 11:03, a car horn honked outside. Martha jumped up, suddenly energized. That's James. Dad, can you just do a quick transfer to my account? I have the routing numbers right here. She dug through her purse, pulling out a piece of paper with her banking information, written in careful handwriting. Actually, sweetheart, I'd like to meet James first. It's been a while since I've seen him. She paused, clearly not expecting this. Oh, well, he's probably in a hurry. We need to get to the airport, and I'm sure he has a few minutes to say hello to his girlfriend's father. Before Martha could object further, I walked to the front door and opened it. James was sitting in his BMW with the engine running, but when he saw me, he turned off the car and got out. He was exactly as I remembered, tall, well-groomed, with the kind of confident smile that came naturally to people who made their living charming others. Mr. Whitman, great to see you again. He bounded up the front steps with his hand extended. His handshake was firm, practiced, designed to convey sincerity and strength. James, please, come in for a minute. I was just making fresh coffee. Oh, that's really nice of you, but we're cutting it pretty close with the airport timing. Nonsense. Martha tells me you've never been to Italy. I spent some time there in my 20s. I'd love to give you a few recommendations. I saw James and Martha exchange a quick glance. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod, and he flashed that practiced smile again. You know what? A quick cup of coffee sounds great. In the kitchen, I watched them together with new eyes. James sat close to Martha, his hand resting possessively on her knee. She leaned into him, playing the role of the devoted girlfriend. But I noticed how James's eyes kept darting around the room, taking inventory. He lingered on the expensive kitchen appliances, the art on the walls, the view of the landscaped backyard through the sliding glass doors. So, James, Martha tells me you're in medical device sales. That's right. Surgical instruments, mostly. It's a great field, really growing industry. And business is good? Oh, absolutely. Last month was my best month ever, actually. Last month was his best month ever. But he needed Martha's father to fund their vacation. Interesting. That's wonderful. I'm sure you worked hard for it. Well, you know what they say. The harder you work, the luckier you get. James delivered this platitude with the confidence of someone who'd used it many times before. Martha smiled adoringly at him, as if he'd just shared profound wisdom. Dad was just asking about our trip planning, Martha said, and I caught the slight warning in her tone. I told him how we've been looking forward to this for so long. Oh yeah, absolutely. Martha's been amazing, doing all the research, finding the perfect hotels. I'm just along for the ride. James squeezed Martha's hand. She's got incredible taste. Incredible taste in expensive hotels that cost 4,000 euros per night. Martha certainly knows what she likes, I agreed. She's always had high standards. I can see where she gets it from, James said, gesturing around the kitchen. This is a beautiful home. Martha's told me so much about growing up here. All good things, I hope. Oh, absolutely. She talks about you all the time, how supportive you've been, how close you two are. I think it's really special, the relationship you have, the relationship we have. If only he knew what I'd learned about that relationship 3 days ago. We've always been there for each other, I said neutrally. That's so important in a family, James continued. My parents, well, let's just say they weren't as generous as you've been with Martha. She's lucky to have someone who really understands her. Someone who really understands her. The irony was almost overwhelming. Martha glanced at her watch. Dad, we really should get going soon. The transfer? I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd devoted my life to, sitting next to the man she was planning to defraud me with. They both looked so eager, so confident that everything was going according to plan. Of course, let me just get my laptop. I stood up slowly, taking my time. James, while I'm doing this, why don't you tell Martha about that restaurant I mentioned? The one in Florence with the view of the Duomo? James looked blank for a moment, then recovered. Oh, right. The one with the amazing pasta? I hadn't mentioned any restaurant. That's the one, I said, smiling. Martha, you'll love it. Very romantic. As I walked toward my office, I heard James whisper to Martha, "What restaurant was he talking about?" "I don't know," she whispered back. "Just agree with whatever he says." I sat down at my laptop and opened my banking website. Then I sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen, listening to Martha and James murmur quietly in the kitchen. This was it. The moment of truth. I could transfer the $10,000, send them off to Italy, and pretend I'd never heard that phone call. I could go back to being the generous father, the easy mark, the useful old man worth $19 million. Or I could finally stop enabling the daughter who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. I made my choice. When I returned to the kitchen, Martha and James looked up expectantly. "All done," I said. Martha's face broke into a radiant smile. "Really? Oh my God, Dad, thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to me, to us." "I think I'm beginning to understand exactly what it means to you," I said quietly. If either of them caught the undertone in my voice, they didn't show it. They were too focused on their victory, too confident in their manipulation, too certain that they'd gotten exactly what they wanted. They had no idea what was coming next. Martha pulled out her phone immediately, opening her banking app with the eager anticipation of someone expecting good news. I watched her face as she checked her account balance. The smile that had been so radiant just moments before began to falter. "Dad," she said slowly, staring at her screen, "I don't see the transfer." "Check again," I suggested mildly. "Sometimes these things take a few minutes to show up." She refreshed the app, her thumb moving frantically across the screen. James leaned over to look, his confident expression beginning to shift toward concern. "Maybe it's just delayed," James said, but his voice had lost some of its assurance. "Banks can be slow sometimes." Martha looked up at me, confusion clouding her features. "Dad, are you sure you hit send? Because it's really not showing up and we need to leave for the airport in like 20 minutes. "I'm absolutely sure I completed the transaction," I said, settling back into my chair. "But Martha, before you go, I wanted to talk to you about something." "Dad, can it wait? We really need to figure out this money thing first." "Actually, the money thing is exactly what I want to talk about." Something in my tone must have registered because Martha's phone suddenly seemed less important. She set it down on the table and looked at me with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for discussing her financial needs. "What do you mean?" I took a sip of my coffee, taking my time. "I've been thinking about our relationship lately, sweetheart. About all the ways you've enriched my life over the years." Martha relaxed slightly, probably thinking this was heading toward some sentimental father-daughter moment. "Oh, Dad, you've enriched my life too. You know that." "Have I? Because sometimes I wonder if you really appreciate everything I've done for you." James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This wasn't the conversation he'd signed up for. But Martha, well-versed in managing my emotional needs, leaned forward with practiced concern. "Of course I appreciate you, Dad. You're the most important person in my life. You always have been." "That's interesting," I said thoughtfully. "Because I was just calculating the other day, and do you know how much money I've given you over the past 5 years?" Martha's expression became very still. "Dad, I don't really keep track of things like that. You're my father. It's not like I'm keeping a running tally." "Well, I am. $200,000, Martha. That's what I've given you in 5 years." The number hung in the air like a toxic cloud. James's eyes widened slightly. Martha's face went pale. I don't think it's been that much, Dad. Maybe you're including things like Christmas gifts, and I'm not including gifts. I'm talking about the apartment deposits, the car payments, the business venture investments, the emergency expenses. $200,000. James was looking between Martha and me, like he was watching a tennis match, clearly uncertain whether he should leave or stay. "Dad, I don't understand why you're bringing this up now. I thought we were past keeping score about money." "We are past it," I agreed. "We're way past it. Because you see, Martha, I know about the hotel in Rome." She blinked. "What about it?" 4,000 euros per night. That's what the penthouse suite at the Hotel de Russie costs. For 8 nights, that's over $36,000. The color drained completely from Martha's face. James looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "How did you—" Martha started, then stopped herself. "How did I know? I called the hotel, sweetheart." Amazing what you can learn when you start asking questions instead of just writing checks. Martha's hands were trembling slightly, but she tried to rally. "Dad, we were going to pay the difference ourselves. The 10,000 was just to help with flights and some meals and—" "Martha, stop." My voice was quiet but firm. "Just stop lying to me." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "I know you lost your job 6 weeks ago. I know James has a pattern of dating women with money. I know this entire trip is being funded by me, not split between you two like you claimed." James finally found his voice. "Mr. Whitman, I think there's been some misunderstanding—" "James, please, don't make this worse than it already is." I turned back to Martha, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "But here's what I really want to talk about, sweetheart. I want to talk about what you said when you thought I couldn't hear you." Martha went completely rigid. "What are you talking about?" "Tuesday morning, after you asked for the money. You forgot to hang up your phone." I watched the realization dawn on her face. Watched the moment when she understood that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. "Dad, I heard everything, Martha. Every word. About the useless old man who's worth $19 million. About how you're just waiting for me to die so you can inherit everything. About how you might need to help nature along if I live too long." The silence in the kitchen was deafening. James looked like he might actually be sick. Martha's breathing had become shallow and rapid. "Dad, you don't understand. I was upset about something else, and I was venting, and—" "You were planning my death, Martha. You were discussing it like a business strategy." Tears started streaming down her face, but I felt nothing. After 30 years of responding to her tears with comfort and open wallets, I felt absolutely nothing. "I didn't mean it," she whispered. "I would never actually—" "I love you, Dad. You have to know that." "Do I? Because for 30 years I thought you loved me. I thought every time you called, every time you visited, every time you told me I was the best father in the world, it was real. But it wasn't, was it?" She was crying harder now, mascara running down her cheeks. "It was real. It is real. I do love you. You love my bank account, Martha. You love what I can provide for you. But me? The person? You called me a useless old man whose only value is dying and leaving you money." James tried to stand up. "Maybe I should go. This seems like a family matter." "Sit down, James." My voice carried an authority I'd never used before. "You're part of this now. You're the one who's been encouraging her to see me as a source of funding rather than a human being." "That's not true," James protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? You've been with her 2 months, and you're already comfortable with the idea of taking expensive trips funded by her father's money. That doesn't strike you as problematic?" James didn't answer. I turned back to Martha, who was clutching her phone like it might somehow save her from this conversation. "So here's what's going to happen," I said calmly. "There is no money transfer. There never was going to be a money transfer. You're not going to Italy on my dime." Dad, please." "I'm not finished. From now on, the bank of Dad is permanently closed. No more apartment deposits, no more car payments, no more emergency loans, no more investments in business ventures that don't exist." Martha's sobs were becoming louder, more desperate. "You can't do this. I'm your daughter." "You're right, you are my daughter. And I failed you, Martha. I failed you by teaching you that love could be bought, that you never had to be responsible for your own choices because Daddy would always fix everything." I stood up, feeling strangely calm. "But I'm not going to fail you anymore. For the first time in your adult life, you're going to have to figure things out on your own." James finally found his backbone. "This is crazy, Mr. Whitman. She's your only child. You can't just cut her off over one conversation where she was upset." "One conversation?" "James, this wasn't one conversation. This was a pattern that's been going on for years, maybe decades. I just finally heard the truth about it." Martha suddenly stopped crying and looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was cold, calculating, and completely devoid of the warmth I'd always associated with my daughter. "Fine," she said, her voice steady now. "If that's how you want to play this, fine. But don't think I'm going to just disappear from your life. I have rights, Dad. Legal rights." "What kind of rights?" "Inheritance rights. You can't just cut your only child out of your will because of one misunderstanding." There it was. The mask had finally slipped completely away. This wasn't about love or family or even the Italy trip. This was about money, pure and simple. "Actually, Martha, I can do exactly that. It's my money, and I can leave it to whoever I choose." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "We'll see about that." James stood too, clearly eager to escape what had become an extremely uncomfortable situation. "Martha, maybe we should just go." "Yes," I agreed. "You should definitely go. Both of you." As they gathered their things, Martha turned back to me one more time. "You're going to regret this, Dad. When you're old and alone and have no one to take care of you, you're going to remember this conversation and regret every word." I looked at my daughter, this person I'd devoted my entire adult life to, and felt something I'd never experienced before in relation to her: complete indifference. "Martha," I said quietly, "I've been alone for 30 years. I just didn't know it until now." She stormed out, James trailing behind her like a confused puppy. I heard the front door slam, heard James's car start up and drive away. And then, for the first time in 3 decades, I sat in my kitchen in complete blessed silence, knowing that I was finally, truly free. The house felt different after Martha left. Not empty exactly, but peaceful, in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I sat in my kitchen for a long time, drinking coffee that had gone cold, watching the rain finally stop and the sun break through the clouds. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel guilty about disappointing my daughter. Over the next few weeks, I waited for Martha to call. I expected tears, apologies, promises to change. I expected manipulation, guilt trips, threats. What I got was silence, and I realized that the silence was telling me everything I needed to know about the relationship I thought we'd had. A month later, Martha did finally call, but it wasn't what I expected. "Dad, I need to talk to you about your will." No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of our last conversation. Just straight to business. "What about it?" "I think you should reconsider any changes you might be thinking about making. I've been talking to a lawyer, and he says that children have certain legal protections when it comes to inheritance." I almost laughed. Of course she'd consulted a lawyer. Of course she was approaching this like a business transaction. "Martha, do you want to have a conversation about what happened, about what you said about me?" "Dad, I think we both said things we didn't mean. The important thing is that we're family, and family should stick together. Especially when it comes to important financial decisions. Family should stick together. But according to her, I wasn't family. I was an investment strategy." "I see. And James? Is he part of this family financial planning?" There was a pause. "James and I are taking some time apart. We realized we wanted different things." I'll bet they did. I wondered if James had lost interest once he realized the Italy trip wasn't happening and the easy money might have dried up. "That's too bad," I said, though I didn't mean it. "Dad, I think we should meet and talk about this properly, clear the air." "I think the air is pretty clear already, Martha." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know exactly where we stand now. For the first time in 30 years, I understand our relationship completely." She was quiet for a moment. "And where do you think we stand? You're my biological daughter, but you're not my family. Family doesn't calculate each other's deaths for financial gain." "Dad, I told you, I didn't mean those things." "Yes, you did. And the fact that your first call to me in a month is about inheritance law tells me you still mean them." I hung up the phone and immediately called Robert Chen. "Robert, I need to make some changes to my will." 2 days later, I sat in Robert's office, signing documents that felt like the most liberating paperwork I'd ever completed. Martha would inherit $5,000, enough to ensure she couldn't claim I'd forgotten about her, but not enough to fund the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to at my expense. The rest of my estate would go to 3 charities, one that provided college scholarships for students whose parents had died young, one that supported elderly people who had been abandoned by their families, and one that funded financial literacy education for young adults. "Are you sure about this, Stuart?" Robert asked as I signed the final page. "This is a significant decision. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The months that followed were the most peaceful I'd experienced since Margaret died. Without the constant financial drain of Martha's needs and wants, I discovered I was actually quite comfortable. More than comfortable, really. I started doing things I'd put off for years. I took a cooking class and learned to make pasta from scratch. I joined a hiking group and rediscovered how much I enjoyed being outdoors. I volunteered at the Literacy Center, helping adults learn to read. For the first time in decades, my time was my own. My money was my own. My decisions were my own. Martha tried several more times to reconnect, but each attempt followed the same pattern. She would call, we would talk, and within minutes the conversation would turn to money. She never asked how I was feeling, never inquired about my health or my happiness. She only wanted to know if I was thinking clearly about my financial decisions. The last time we spoke was 6 months after the Italy incident. She called to tell me she was engaged again to a man named Robert, who worked in investment banking. "I wanted you to hear it from me first," she said, her voice warm and loving in that practiced way I'd learned to recognize. "Congratulations. How long have you known Robert?" 3 months, but when you know, right? "He's wonderful, Dad. Really successful, very stable. I think you'd like him." I'm sure I would have. I'm sure Robert was very successful and very stable and very capable of funding Martha's lifestyle. "Are you planning a big wedding?" "Well, we're still discussing it. Robert has a different perspective on spending than some people. He's more practical." I wondered how long it would take Martha to grow bored with practical. "When's the wedding?" "We haven't set a date yet. We're taking our time, making sure everything is perfect." There was a pause, and I knew what was coming. "Dad, I know things have been complicated between us, but I hope you'll be there. You're still my father." "I'm still your father, but I'm not still your ATM." "I don't know what you mean." "I mean, I know this call isn't really about inviting me to your wedding, Martha. This is about testing whether I've changed my mind about supporting you financially." Another pause. "Dad, I really think we should meet in person and talk about all of this." "What exactly would we talk about?" "About the future, about family, about making sure we don't let money come between us." Money come between us. As if money hadn't been the only thing connecting us for years. "Martha, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm 61 years old. If I'm lucky, I have 20 good years left. I'm not going to spend those years being manipulated by someone who sees me as a source of funding rather than a human being. That's not how I see you." "Yes, it is, and you know what? I'm okay with that now. I understand who you are, I understand what I am to you, and I've made my peace with it." "What does that mean?" "It means I hope you have a happy life, Martha. I hope Robert makes you happy in ways that don't require my financial support. And I hope you never have to depend on anyone the way you've depended on me." "Dad, goodbye, Martha." I hung up the phone and turned it off. Then I walked out to my backyard, where I'd been working on a garden. It was small, just some tomatoes and herbs, but it was mine. I'd planted it, I was tending it, and I would harvest it. For the first time in 30 years, I was growing something for myself. A year later, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure. Nothing serious, just something that needed monitoring and medication. As I sat in the doctor's office, listening to him explain the treatment plan, I thought about Martha's casual comment about helping nature along by discouraging me from taking my medication. I took my pills religiously. Every morning, every evening, exactly as prescribed. I also started going to therapy. Dr. Rodriguez was a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma and emotional manipulation. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced with Martha had a name: financial abuse. "It's more common than people think," she explained during one of our sessions. "Adult children who see their parents primarily as sources of financial support. The emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, the way she made her love contingent on your generosity. Those are all forms of abuse. But I enabled it, I said. I made it possible. You were being a loving parent. She exploited that love. Those are two very different things. Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand that my grief wasn't just about losing Martha. It was about grieving the daughter I thought I had, the relationship I thought we'd shared, the 30 years of love I thought had been real. The good news, she said, is that you get to choose what comes next. You're not responsible for who Martha became, but you are responsible for who you become from here. 2 years after the Italy incident, I received a letter from Martha. Not a phone call, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter delivered by mail. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Dad, it began, I'm writing to tell you that Robert and I are getting divorced. I know you probably don't care, but I thought you should know. I also thought you should know that I've been in therapy, and my therapist thinks I should reach out to you to discuss our relationship. She says I have issues with emotional availability and financial dependence. I don't really understand what she means, but she says I need to take responsibility for my part in our problems. So I guess this is me taking responsibility. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings with some of the things I said. I hope you're doing well. Love, Martha. I read the letter twice, then put it in my desk drawer. It wasn't really an apology. It was therapy homework, a checkbox Martha was trying to tick off to satisfy her counselor. Even her attempt at reconciliation was performative, but for the first time, I felt something like pity for her. She was 34 years old and still didn't understand how to have genuine relationships with people. She'd spent so many years manipulating others for financial gain that she'd never learned how to simply love someone without expecting something in return. I didn't respond to the letter. 3 years after the Italy incident, I met Linda. She was a widow who volunteers at the Literacy Center, a woman my age who'd raised 3 children on her own after her husband died young. She was kind, intelligent, and completely self-sufficient. Our first conversation was about books. Our second was about gardening. Our third was about loss and healing and starting over. Money never came up. We've been together for 6 months now, and I'm happier than I've been in decades. Linda doesn't need me to rescue her or fund her lifestyle or solve her problems. She wants my company because she enjoys who I am, not what I can provide. This is what love actually feels like. Yesterday, Linda asked me about my family. Do you have children? She said as we worked side by side in my garden. I thought about the question for a long moment. I had a daughter, I finally said, but I lost her a long time ago. I'm sorry, did she pass away? In a way, I said, but that's a story for another day. Linda nodded and handed me a tomato she'd just picked. It was perfect, red and firm and ready for harvest. I'm 64 now. If I'm lucky, I have 15 or 20 good years left. And for the first time since Margaret died, I'm not spending those years taking care of someone who sees me as useful rather than lovable. I'm spending them with someone who knows the difference. Martha calls occasionally, usually around holidays or when she's between relationships. I'm polite but distant. I ask about her health, her work, her general well-being. I don't ask about her finances, and I don't offer assistance. Last Christmas, she sent me a card with a photo of herself. She looked older, tired, but she was smiling. On the back, she'd written, "Thinking of you, Dad. I hope you're happy." I think she meant it. I think in whatever way she's capable of, Martha actually wanted me to be happy. It just took her 34 years to realize that my happiness had nothing to do with her financial security. I kept the card, but I didn't respond to it, because the truth is, I am happy. For the first time in decades, I'm genuinely, completely happy. I have Linda, I have my garden, I have my volunteer work, and I have the peace that comes from knowing that no one in my life sees me as a walking ATM. The money I once spent on Martha's endless needs now goes toward things that actually matter. Charity, travel with Linda, experiences that enrich my life rather than drain it. And when I die, whether that's in 5 years or 25, my estate will go to organizations that help people who actually need it, not to someone who spent 3 decades taking advantage of a father's unconditional love. That's not revenge, that's justice. And it feels like the most loving thing I could possibly do, for myself and for the memory of the man I used to be when I thought being a good father meant saying yes to everything. I was wrong about a lot of things. But I'm not wrong about this. I deserve better than what Martha offered me, and I finally have it.